My boyfriend lied about his past. My best friend knew and they betrayed me in the worst way possible. Hey everyone. Before we dive into this absolutely wild story about betrayal, secrets, and the ultimate revenge, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss more stories like this one. It's one for the books. Ready? Let's get into it. Ethan, 30M, and I, 27F, met at a mutual friend's housewarming party. He was charming, witty, and seemed to know just the right thing to say. From the very first date, it felt like we were meant to be. He made me feel special, like the center of his world. Date nights were always elaborate. Candlelit dinners, surprise weekend getaways, and thoughtful gifts. My friends were jealous, and honestly I felt like I'd hit the jackpot. Kara, 28F, my best friend since college, immediately hit it off with Ethan too. She joked about stealing him from me, but it never felt serious. It was just her sense of humor, or so I thought. Part 2. Cracks beneath the surface. After about 2 years of dating, things began to change. Ethan's grand gestures became fewer and far between, and he seemed to be hiding something. He'd leave the room to take calls and lock his phone more often than usual. When I mentioned it, he'd laugh it off, saying, "Work's just crazy right now, babe. Don't stress." Kara, my confidant, was usually the first to call out suspicious behavior. But instead of agreeing with me, she'd defend him. "You're being paranoid. Ethan adores you." Her dismissive attitude confused me. This wasn't like her. Part 3. Kara's distance. Around the same time, Kara started pulling away. She canceled plans, stopped responding to texts as quickly, and seemed evasive when we did talk. Once, when I invited her over for dinner, she declined, saying she had a migraine. Later that night, I saw her post a story on Instagram. She was out at a bar with mutual friends. When I confronted her about it, she brushed it off. "Oh, that was last minute. I didn't think you'd want to come since you've been so busy with Ethan." The explanation didn't sit right, but I let it go. Part 4. The first slip-up. The real unraveling began on Ethan's birthday. I'd planned a surprise party and invited a few close friends, including Kara. Everything went smoothly, until I overheard a conversation between them. I was in the kitchen grabbing drinks when I heard Kara hiss, "You need to tell her." Ethan responded in a low voice, "Not now. I'll handle it." My stomach churned. What did he need to tell me? Part 5. A trail of lies. That night, curiosity got the best of me. While Ethan was asleep, I decided to check his phone. He always kept it password protected, but I'd seen him enter the code before. What I found shook me to my core. There were messages between Ethan and Kara going back months. Most were vague. "We can't keep doing this. She's going to find out. I still care about you." But one stood out. "What if she figures out what happened in Vegas?" Vegas? Ethan had never mentioned going to Vegas, and neither had Kara. Part 6. The confrontation. The next morning, I confronted Ethan. I didn't mention the messages. I wanted to see how much he'd admit. "Is there something you need to tell me?" I asked. He looked startled but quickly composed himself. "What do you mean?" "Vegas," I said. "What happened in Vegas?" His face went pale. For a moment I thought he might come clean. Instead he laughed nervously. "Oh, that. Kara and I went to a concert there years ago. It's not a big deal." His response didn't satisfy me, but I pretended to drop it. Part 7. Digging deeper. I couldn't let it go. I started digging into Ethan's past, checking old Facebook photos and LinkedIn connections. That's when I found it. A tagged photo of Ethan and Kara at a wedding chapel in Vegas. They were dressed as a bride and groom. The caption read, "Congratulations to the happy couple." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Part 8. The revelation. When I confronted Ethan again, he admitted to the marriage but claimed it was a drunken mistake. "We got it annulled the next day," he said. "It's ancient history." I didn't believe him. Kara's behavior, the secretive texts, none of it added up. Part 9. The real truth. I hired a private investigator, desperate for answers. What they uncovered was beyond anything I'd imagined. Ethan and Kara weren't just exes, they were still married. But it didn't stop there. Ethan and Kara had been running a long con for years. They targeted successful, financially stable women, manipulating them into relationships before draining their accounts. Once they'd gotten what they wanted, they'd move on to the next victim. And I was their latest target. Part 10. Their endgame. The PI discovered that Ethan had been slowly siphoning money from my joint savings account. Meanwhile, Kara had been feeding him information about my finances and vulnerabilities. Their plan was to convince me to sell my condo and invest in a fake real estate venture Ethan had set up. Part 11. Setting the trap. Instead of confronting them, I decided to play along. I pretended to trust Ethan completely, even agreeing to the fake investment. Behind the scenes, I worked with the PI to gather evidence. I also contacted their previous victims who were eager to help. Part 12. The ultimate revenge. On the day Ethan and Kara thought they'd be getting my money, I showed up with the police. Armed with evidence of their fraud, they were arrested on the spot. But the humiliation didn't end there. I shared their story on Reddit and it went viral overnight. News outlets picked it up and their faces were plastered all over social media. Part 13. Moving forward. It's been a year since it all went down. Ethan and Kara are serving time for fraud and I've worked hard to rebuild my life. The experience taught me a lot about trust and resilience. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. Karma always finds a way. Call to action. What would you do in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more insane stories like this one. Ethan, 30M, swept me, 27F, off my feet from the moment we met. He had this incredible way of making me feel like the only woman in the world. Kara, 28F. My best friend since college, was thrilled for me. She gushed about how perfect we were for each other and even helped me plan our anniversary surprises. But looking back, I realized she wasn't just supportive, she was invested. Part 2. The suspicious phone call. 6 months before everything fell apart, Ethan got a strange call during dinner. His face tensed and he excused himself. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard the urgency in his voice. When he came back, he seemed distracted. Work stuff, he said when I asked. I wanted to believe him, but later that night I caught him texting someone. He claimed it was his boss, but when I glanced at the screen, the contact name was K. Subplot 1. Kara's new boyfriend. Around this time, Kara started talking about a new guy she was seeing, someone mysterious she wouldn't name. It's early, she said when I asked for details. I don't want to jinx it. I didn't press her, but I found it odd. Kara was usually an open book about her relationships. Once during a girls' night, her phone buzzed with a message. She quickly flipped it over, but not before I caught a glimpse of the sender. Part 3. The Vegas clue. The Vegas messages were the first real crack in the facade. After discovering the photo of Ethan and Kara at a wedding chapel, I couldn't sleep. I started piecing together fragments of conversations and offhand comments they'd made over the years. Kara once joked about doing something crazy in Vegas and how the past has a way of staying buried. At the time, I thought she was being philosophical. Now it felt like a confession. Subplot 2. Ethan's family drama. Ethan rarely talked about his family. He claimed they were complicated and preferred to keep his distance. But one day his sister Lauren reached out to me on social media. She introduced herself warmly, but her tone changed when I mentioned Ethan. Be careful, she wrote. Ethan isn't who he seems. When I showed Ethan the message, he laughed it off. Lauren's always been dramatic. Don't let her get in your head. Still, her words lingered. Part 4. Kara's betrayal. The growing distance with Kara was hard to ignore. She started dodging my questions about her new boyfriend and made flimsy excuses to cancel plans. One night, I decided to test her. I casually mentioned a fake plan to take Ethan on a surprise trip to Mexico. Kara's face froze. That's interesting, she said. Are you sure he's free that weekend? Her reaction was so off that I knew something was wrong. Subplot 3. A mysterious letter. A few weeks later, I received an anonymous letter in the mail. It was typed with no return address and it said, "They're lying to you. Look deeper." My first instinct was to dismiss it as a prank, but the timing was too coincidental. I started digging into Ethan's past, searching for anything that might explain the letter. That's when I discovered the old wedding photos of him and Kara. Part 5. The Fake Life. After confronting Ethan and Kara about their Vegas wedding, I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't telling the whole truth. Kara started avoiding me completely and Ethan became overly affectionate, almost as if he was trying to distract me. But the real breakthrough came when I found an old box in Ethan's closet labeled Vegas. Inside were photos, receipts, and legal documents that proved their marriage wasn't annulled. Subplot 4. The ex-girlfriend's warning. Through my digging, I found one of Ethan's ex-girlfriends on Instagram. Her name was Rachel, and her bio hinted at surviving a toxic relationship. When I reached out, she was reluctant to talk but eventually opened up. "Ethan's a charmer, but he's dangerous," Rachel said. "He and that girl Kara, they use people. They used me." Her story mirrored mine. Ethan had swept her off her feet, Kara had befriended her, and then they disappeared after draining her bank account. Part 6. Setting the Trap. Now fully aware of their con, I decided to play along. I pretended to trust Ethan completely, even agreeing to sell my condo to invest in his fake real estate venture. Meanwhile, I worked with Rachel and the private investigator to gather evidence. Subplot 5. Ethan's partner in crime. The PI discovered that Ethan and Kara weren't working alone. They had a silent partner, a man named Jared who handled the financial side of their scams. Jared had been linked to several shell companies, one of which matched the fake venture Ethan had pitched to me. With Jared's involvement, the case against them grew even stronger. Part 7. The Big Reveal. On the day Ethan thought he'd be getting my money, I invited him and Kara to a celebration dinner. They arrived, expecting champagne and congratulations. Instead, they were greeted by police officers and Rachel, who delivered a blistering monologue about their crimes. The look on their faces was priceless. Subplot 6. Public backlash. I didn't stop at legal action. I shared my story online, complete with receipts, photos, and testimonies from other victims. The post went viral and news outlets picked it up. Ethan and Kara became the internet's most hated scammers overnight. Part 8. Moving on. It's been over a year since their arrest. I've used my experience to start a support group for victims of fraud, helping others rebuild their lives. Sometimes I wonder how I missed the signs, but I remind myself that even the sharpest people can be deceived. Call to action. What do you think about their twisted scheme? Would you have fallen for it too? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories.